Horse racing, harness racing, greyhound racing. Modern pentathlon, floorball. Camel racing, I forgot about that. They had little toy horses, and then the big cabinet was the grandstand, and a little picture frame was the winning post. Ruler was the semaphore board because it had numbers on it, and then had little steeplechase races. And
so were you calling?
Yes, they went around commentating it all. And
how old are you at this stage?
I've been 10. It was the imagery, the track, it was the movement, it was Greg Miles's voice over the PA. I was obsessed to do it, really.
I'm going to call that Melbourne Cup one day.
After I finished school, I actually applied for the dole for like 12 months. I was an out-of-work race caller. Got a phone call from John Tapp.
Himself?
Matt, I'm very happy to tell you that you're the recipient of the John Tapp Scholarship.
And what's the scholarship entail?
Everything. So I had a day in makeup to learn how to tie a tie.
I missed that day. I still need that day. Is there nerves before your first Melbourne Cup call?
I'm nervous before every Melbourne Cup. I just try and think I'm calling it to one person. Because if you start thinking about the crowd, you'd never do it.
You wouldn't.
So I just imagine Mum driving over the Westgate Bridge and I'm telling her what's going on. They're coming to me for an equestrian update. I don't know if I can do this. And next thing I'm on the floor, I'm gone. The two team doctors came and I remember the last words, "You're going to be in a coma. We just need to tell you that your mum loves you."
Jeez.
So thinking, okay, this is pretty serious stuff.
Well, this man wanders into the studio. I have the delight of spending that entire day with him because it is a Thursday. So later on, we will be calling Melbourne and Richmond together. We'll probably be sick of each other by half time. But this man is a star of broadcasting. He is much loved. His name is Matt Hill. Hilly, welcome to the Howie Games. Great man.
It's outstanding to be here, Howie. And of all the list of people that you've interviewed of all the times, it's very, very nice to be here.
Well, to be honest, mate, sort of 238, 239 episodes in, we're starting to get a bit skinny.
I'm happy to be 239. I'm happy with that.
We are going to the footy tonight, as I mentioned. So it's Anzac Eve, which is always a privilege. How much work and what type of work right off the top goes into you getting ready for tonight's broadcast on Fox? What do you do, mate? What do you do?
I reckon any game of football or any horse race or any Olympic Games, anything you prepare for, you're always preparing for it because you're listening to things on the television, in the news, you're reading the paper all the time. So you're always taking note of little things. But then when you get a match where you've got to concentrate on two teams, Melbourne and Richmond, I've seen them a couple of times, both teams, before tonight, so I've written up some notes already through the year, so they'll be with me tonight, and then a lot of it is just reading up on narratives of players leading in, because as you know, like as far as our role, we've got 6 commentators on our team. 2 of us are play-by-play. So our role fundamentally is to call the game as accurate as we can and possibly give some sort of a narrative of what's going on. And then it's up to the other guys who are the ex-players to explain what you're seeing. So as long as you prepare as far as the players are concerned, what they look like, who they are, what their stories are, I think you're ready to go.
Do you have a couple of players, and I'm blessed now because these two don't look anything like each other, and now they're at separate clubs. When they're at Port Adelaide, Houston and Amon, they don't even look like each other. I could never pick them. So whenever one of them had the ball, I would call them warily. Now Carl's at Hawthorn, Dan's at Collingwood. Do you have certain players where you second guess yourself?
I think every caller would admit that they have a player out there sometimes that they just can't quite get a handle on, and it's for no reason. It might just be their pronunciation of the name. It could be what they look like. It just doesn't sink in, and that happens to me with racehorses as well. There'll be a set of colours or a horse's name that just doesn't sink in, and you're forever looking. I find it's difficult when you've got a set of brothers. So you might have, I always find with GWS, even though I know them so well, Toby Green and Tom Green, you're just double checking which ones it's Toby or Tom, like Toby or Tom, Toby. Like you're always just double checking before you say their name. Because as you know, on television, there's nowhere to hide. You have to call the right player.
You do.
Radio, if you've called the wrong player, a passage of play before, you can get away with it because no one's seen it. But you need to double check all the time. So there are players that you do have a little glance just to double check you get it right. I find there's probably teams too that are a little bit more difficult than others.
Yeah, the Ashcroft brothers for me, 8 and 10 at Brisbane, both blonde, both long hair. They can be spinning out of a pack in a hurry. If you can't see the number, you have that. Your popularity is something I want to ask you about. I'm going to ask you a very difficult question in a moment for you to answer as to why you're popular. But Fox Footy put out 2 weeks ago Matt Hill's Gather Round, which was Wednesday, call 8 races at Sandown in Melbourne. Thursday, fly to Adelaide and call Thursday night footy. Friday, fly back to Melbourne, prepare for Saturday races. Saturday, drive 2 hours to Bendigo, call 10 races, drive back to Melbourne. Sunday, fly to Adelaide, call Sunday Arvo footy, Saints versus GWS, fly back to Melbourne. Big schedule, which we'll talk about. But what I wanted to talk to you, I looked at some of the comments. Now, social media can be a wonderful place and it can be a brutal place, Hilly. I'm just going to read you right off the top. Well, I've called you, the first reply is actually me, which I'll explain in a moment. I've called you the Ravi Shastri of Altona and tagged Jack Rewald, which I'll explain in a moment. But then, Patterson Entertainment. Matt Hill is a wonderful commentator. TV Willie's win official. What a legend. From a different time, a better time, and his voice comforts me. He's a magician. Big Darty Cameron soothes my ears every time I hear him. This is not in order. These are the first replies. Nick Macko 7, best in the business by a long way. Hagen's 11, best footy caller by the length of the Fleming Strait. Vince Mataferi, got the most luxurious voice. Mitchell Searle 25, I love you, Matt. Bill Morgan, absolute legend. Danny Lackgrave, pay him all the money that you give to, I'm not going to put whose name is there. Aussie Chalet 2021, best caller in Aussie sports. I go on, you couldn't love him anymore, etc., etc. We're 4 rounds down and I'm yet to hear, I'll leave that name out, absolutely brilliant by Fox Footy to snare Hill. He's the best in the business. Best caller in the land. Top one. Number one. Iconic. There's a picture of a goat here. Can we clone him and have him on every broadcast? So I haven't filtered out the negative ones because at this point, and then Jez has said, how's the comments? With a big love heart next to it.
Well, that's very kind.
Before we get to the Ravi Shastri of Altona, why do you think in a negative world where anyone in sports commentary receives positive feedback but a lot of negative feedback, why do you think there is so much love for you?
I don't know because I am not that sort of person. You know, I tend to, I'm not on social media, so I don't.
Well,
really...
you bloody should be, Guru. you would be flying.
It's so nice that people are, but a lot of that, you know, is really lovely, and it's nice that it's rewarding that you work hard on something and people, you know, enjoy it, which is fantastic. And you're right, it is a negative world. I mean, I probably read some social media stuff very early on when Twitter first started, and it sort of scared me off it, really. I'm probably a bit of a sensitive soul. And I'm always very aware, too, of just what the human race is like. If you build someone up too much, then there'll be the naysayers. There'll be, you know, I get very embarrassed when people say nice things because there'll be 400 people behind them trying to knock you down. You know.
Well, so, apparently there's not.
Oh, there will be. Oh, you know what the world's like. So I try and keep it pretty neutral. The answer to why, the only thing I can think of is that. I think because I've come from a broadcasting perspective where I'm a broadcaster who loves football, whereas probably in the last 20 years, a lot of the producers or high up of networks, etc., have concentrated on footballers calling.
Ex-athletes.
Ex-athletes going into calling every sport,
yep.
Really. You can name them from all different sports. So maybe that's because I've come in as a broadcaster already of a set sport like horse racing. But that can
bring hate itself. That can bring what would he know? He's never played the game.
True.
What would he know? He's never ridden a horse. Although you may have. I don't know if you've ridden a horse.
Never ridden a horse. Never. Well, I had once and it wasn't a great experience for me. Or the horse, for that matter. So, yeah, that's the only thing I can... And I know what you're saying. I mean, I think I come from a genuine place that I love watching football and love it. So maybe that comes across. And I think also the fact that I've been one to say that if I'm sitting next to Dermot Brereton, and we've had lovely experiences, we got a lift home from the football from the greatest of all time in Lee Matthews the other night, and these guys are superstars. So why is the boy from Altona going to come in and give an opinion? I mean, I just play my role, you know, and it's not about the commentators. It sort of embarrasses me when they do things like that and I know they've got to promote and things, but at the end of the day, it's what's going on out there. It's the game. It's our job is just to give it some context and some excitement when required. But really, they're the guys that are providing the excitement. We're just a soundtrack, you know, and I'm aware of that. I don't do it to be well known. I don't do it for that reason. So maybe that comes across.
You mentioned we got a lift home with Lee Matthews. just take people behind the scenes. So we're in Brisbane. It's yourself, myself, Nathan Buckley and Lee Matthews. First game I've ever called with Lee Matthews. I'm beside myself. As a Hawthorn fan, I'm like, wow. And you walk in there and he's like, hey, Howie, how are you? And you're like, you're just pumped.
And to your credit, you know, I know you pretty well now. We've called a bit of footy together. I never knew you were a Hawthorn supporter. I never knew that.
Well, that's good. That's good. That's good. I did my best with that cracking game of football. That's. Let's get back to that at some point about biasing calls. Remind me to get us back to that. But we were meant to be getting an Uber home, myself, yourself, and Nathan. And the three of us were discussing how difficult it was going to be to get an Uber out of the Gabba. You should pick up the story here. What did Lee say?
Well, I think what had happened was I think Lee, just because he's such a great man, said, oh, well, where have you got to go? Thinking that we'd be 5 minutes up the road and being very generous to say, well, I can give you a lift. And within 2 seconds, we went, fantastic, thanks, Lee. And I think he thought, oh, I'm regretting this now.
He thought we were going to say, no, mate, we'll be right. but no. So he just carved his way through the Gabba, the back parts.
It was magnificent to watch, wasn't it? It was just, he knew he just flew past all the corporate boxes, and within 2 seconds, everybody who was half dislocated outside they were looking at him going, that was Lee Matthews.
But he was too quick by the time they realised.
Too fast.
And just tell the good people, you and me are sitting in the back talking about the game. It was a cracking game of football, Brisbane-Collingwood. Tell the people about Nathan's directions and how one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time, was dealing with that.
Well, we, of course, were heading to Fortitude Valley where we were staying, and I don't think Bucks's directions were too good. So there was a little bit of frustration from the champ, from Lethal Lee, who's a legend, over to the champ, Buckley, who was getting a little bit frosty himself, and it was entertaining, wasn't
it? Nathan, do we have to turn left or right? I'm like, this is like being in the car with my parents.
But what I loved about that day, because you told us a story for this very podcast, interviewing the great Wally Lewis
that
on
morning,
the day. So you've interviewed Wally Lewis and then sat in a car driven by Lee Matthews with Nathan Buckley. I mean, that's pretty surreal, isn't it?
And saw them debating which was the best way to Fortitude Valley. For the benefit of dropping another name, I had to do an article leading into Gather Round. And Fox Publicity got in touch and said, listen, we just want to promote you and Hilly calling the footy together, and we'd just like to relate your experiences of what it's like calling with Hilly, and, you know, talk about him as a caller and how you're trying to establish a relationship on air, etc. And I had just read the Gather Round feedback from you that I just read then with all these positive comments. And I told the journo with a smile on my face, knowing as I said it, that this would lead the article, I said, I have never seen a man as popular as Matt Hill with the punters, the people, the fans, except for possibly when you go to India and you work with Ravi Shastri, everybody loves him. So immediately the article starts along the lines of, as popular as Ravi Shastri is in Mumbai is how popular Matt Hill is in Australia. So I introduce you every Thursday night. I started night one with the People's Caller, Matt Hill. And I got some feedback from a Triple M man that taught me to commentate football by the name of Barry Denner, who operates as the People's Caller. He immediately messaged me, said, hey, he might be good, but he's not the People's Caller. That's me. So then night two, which I've stuck with, I've gone with, now we introduce the most popular sports broadcaster in Australia, Matt Hill. And I see you shiver every time I say it, which makes you do it more. But Jack Revolt is very keen for me to go off the back of that article which he read. And now we're joined by the Ravi Shastri of Altona, Matt Hill. But I haven't had the nuts to do it on Thursday Night Footy yet. How do you think it would go over?
You've got another 13 weeks to go. So,
I do.
The nicest thing is, I think, the way you and I both call football, is we're just fans. And
Yes.
literally we feel like we're in the outer,
Yep.
getting this great opportunity to call our great game, and that's the way I go about it. I actually genuinely love being there and, love the romance of driving into the MCG and watching these guys play football. So I think that comes across, and I think you're in the same boat. I mean, I think half the time we look at each other and think we're getting paid to do this.
On nights like tonight, we're going to
Yeah.
Anzac Eve, and there'll be that amazing celebration before. And are you calling Anzac Day on the radio tomorrow?
I'm calling racing.
Oh, so you're doing racing
Anzac Day.
tomorrow. I'm there with Triple M tomorrow, and I think it's days like that. It's enormous privilege. But what I found working on Thursday nights this year with you, mate, is that every time you go to the footy, it's a blockbuster. So there's 70 or 80,000 people there. So the background of your job is there to take you right up in the excitement level. So it's a lot different calling 1:45 on Saturday afternoon between two bottom placed sides with 20,000 people there to being at the MCG with 90,000 people there.
But then in another sphere, those smaller games, I genuinely enjoy those as well because it's such a great sport, AFL. It's become so unpredictable that you can get your cliffhanger on a Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock, can't you? You can get your cliffhanger. You've called plenty of cliffhangers on a Saturday afternoon, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And they become the game, the talking point of the round, don't they? So I just think that to be there is just a joy. And because I've come from the background of calling horses, I'm stuck in a box for 7 hours on my own. It's a very lonely place calling a horse race. If there's a horse 5 lengths in front and you don't know what it is, you're on your own, mate. Or if they hit the line lock together and you go for the wrong photo, you feel crap after it because you just know that you've left the punters down, Whereas at least with a game of football, you've got an army of people playing their role. And I think overall, when we walk out after 3 hours as a team, we go, gee, I reckon we did pretty well there, bringing it to life, And it's been great fun building those relationships and that synergy. And it's an interesting, it's probably a longer conversation, but you talk about synergy of commentary. I think if you put... and whoever people think that they are, we've all got different opinions, who the top AFL commentators of all time have been. If you put them together, maybe they wouldn't have worked.
Yeah,
it's all about a chemistry thing.
And you have to build it. I think from where I sit looking next to you, I've only seen you make one glaring mistake in the first 6 rounds, and that was round 2 when you decided an hour and a half before the game to tuck into the beef rendang.
Yes.
Provided by the MCG, and I looked at you and I thought,
mistake.
This is not a good move, and I've looked at Jack Rewalt and he's doing the same thing, and by half-time, you boys were regretting the beef rendang in a fairly major way.
I think Jack was regretting it the next day.
The rendang, got him!
Because there's so many things you get taught, don't you? You don't drink milk, you don't have cake. I watched Dwayne Russell very closely.
Tell people. Tell people what he does.
Well, the thing about... See, Coca-Cola obviously makes you burp, doesn't it?
Yes.
So I love Coca-Cola, but I have to have it in small doses. Otherwise, you'd just be through the whole thing. Whereas Dwayne has 6 of them. And 2 Red Bulls and
a couple of blocks of chocolate.
And of course, the other thing is chocolate's bad for your throat. It sits in there, but he breaks all the ruls.
Not
which
as bad
which
as the
I
beef
love.
rendang was for you, my friend.
No, the beef
Jack.
rendang was no good. So we've dead set put a barring on that. That was very ordinary, wasn't it? But look, I honestly think that if you put, look at Bruce and Dennis. They were 2 completely different commentators, but both brilliant in their own way, and they worked, And I think that I'm fascinated by the fact that those guys that call Gridiron, like the Al Michaels and Chris Collingsworth, that they just gelled, And I think we got something going, Howie.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because you're judged against. Like when we started doing the cricket at 10, you're judged against Richie and Tony,
of course,
and Bill and Ian Chappell. And they've been doing it for 30 years, and you're judged week 1 against their 30 years. So I think it takes time to build any form of chemistry, but I think we're starting in the right direction.
The hardest part about what we do too is that I've found this is that I grew up idolising broadcasters, and all of a sudden you're sitting with them.
And that's when it becomes really difficult.
That's really interesting, because you become a part of the brethren, and you're still a junior, still learning off these people.
So who have you sat next to? To me, I've talked about this before. When I sit next to Alan Border, it's genuine awe I still pinch myself when I sit next to probably Derm or Jason Dunstall because I grew up idolising them both. And I think to myself, with them, it's more I laugh the fact I'm sitting next to them thinking, I can't believe this. With Alan Border, who was my original sporting hero, I look at him and think I shouldn't actually be in the box next to him. Like, who do you sit next to and think? Because a lot of your basis would be racing, but as you say, you call racing by yourself, which we'll get to racing in a moment. But who do you look aside and think, oh, my gee?
Well, in a football sense, Dermot Brereton, absolutely. He was massive when I was young. So Dermot Brereton is just, and of course he, as time went on, became quite a big prominent face in football commentary as well, you know. But I even pinch myself to sit there and think that Tim Lane's in the box next door. You know, I listened to him all my life. You know, and commentators that are still floating around, like even Anthony Hudson. I was brought up listening to Hutto, you know, and now calling games with him is fantastic. As far as ex-football, I mean, Lee Matthews, I don't think we could have got much bigger than that. And
that
you just
was
don't
very
want
cool,
to say
wasn't it?
anything out of place. And of course, and the great thing about the special comments guys is that they're working on their craft as well. So the guys like Jason Dunstall and David King and young Jack, you know, they've got a craft that they're working on. So I enjoy watching those guys as well and working with those guys and learning off them. I love walking into the football and asking Jack a question about what's it like to do this. What's because us mere mortals will never do it.
And I think that's the great key of the special comments. I did a game with Gary Lyon a couple of weeks ago, and I used to sit on the boundary for year after year on Triple M when he was in the box, and I found it then, but now I find it, as you know, you're consumed with calling the game, so you're aware what's happening, but it's in the background. But I find Gary and probably David King has the ability to say something in 15 words that me as a punter that doesn't understand the intricacies of the game can understand while I'm calling the game and think, oh, he's watching a different game to me. I didn't see that, but I can understand what he's saying. I think he's unbelievably good at it. Short, succinct, but able to be identified by the normal punter as to what's going on.
And I think that's our challenge as commentators as well, that how many times can you say the ball's been marked inside 50, or how many times can you say the ball's been kicked through the corridor? I mean, there's got to be 30 different ways you can say it. I mean, but there isn't. You know, it's quite a repetitive game to call in many respects, so you don't want to repeat yourself either.
So do you try and... Like Kelly Underwood explained it to me once that she's got like a file in her head and every word you use a lot, kick, hand pass, mark, tackle, she tries to have 20 different ways of saying he kicks down the wing, it's a long ball down the wing, it's a short drop punt to the wing, the ball spin. Like I went through a period of trying to maybe almost practice on the radio putting a different word in so you can build up that vocabulary, or do you just go with what comes naturally?
I do try and build it up, and you're always listening in to other commentators as well. But the one thing I do is I can try and stop myself on the run. So if I've realised in 5 minutes I've said the same thing twice or 3 times, you stop. You know, and
but you don't always know that.
You don't always know that. You know, someone came up to me very early on and said in round 1, I said, the ball's kick and hope. Someone's kicked and hoped it 4 times in a quarter. So I got rid of that. You know, and sometimes
someone doesn't
it's just,
tell you. Someone said to me earlier on last year, it goes for home.
Yeah.
And it's like, right, so you immediately put that.
The only problem is with things like that is then goes for home, you probably haven't used it since.
Yeah.
You've probably got rid of it completely.
No one's going for home. No one's going for home. So before we start your journey, I'm going to put you on the spot now. So don't feel obligated with those you work with. You can cross broadcasters. You can cross different radio stations. Who do you think? Because it's so subjective. Who is your favourite ball-by-ball caller of football, and who is your favourite special comments operator in football? They might be at Fox. They don't have to be at Fox. They might be at SEN. They might be at Triple M. You can have some thinking music if you want. Because it's subjective. This doesn't mean they're the best. It's just when you're sitting at home, like I have people I like listening to.
Sure. Yeah, well, I was always when I was brought up, it was I was a Bruce McAvaney fan.
Yes,
I think a lot of people are. You know, I was a massive Bruce fan, and And so my heroes in life were like, a guy like Bruce McAvaney, Greg Miles calling the races, a guy called Jim McGrath in England who I idolised. They were people I wanted to be, So Bruce for me had this way when he called the football, he would get a really good amount of excitement to want you to be interested.
Yes.
He got you interested. And then when a goal went through at a big moment, he got you really interested and really pumped up about it. So in a way, he did his job, But then I very much enjoyed, as time's gone on, those guys that called football that were able to use words without that hysteria, like a Tim Lane or a Dennis Cometti, to a bit like the American style where, an event's happened and it's been broadcast, but the commentator's almost been sort of on the side, And I think the American commentators do that very well. You don't hear at the end of a Super Bowl a lot of yelling or, it's very understated. So I probably those three come to mind. And that's what I liked listening to. But then as a kid, I mean, my father would always listen to Rex Hunt.
Would he?
Always. And he was a fisherman as well, so he used to listen to Rex for all different reasons. But
and that's
obviously we were very entertained, completely
because
different
Rex
opposite.
was bigger than the game.
Yes.
And I used to listen to Rex all the time growing up in the country, and I loved it.
Yes. And in fact, I was probably too young to understand a lot of his entendres as well. And now I listen back and go, oh, that's pretty funny,
I still use the word on Triple M when it gets one-sided. It's a destroyation.
Destroyation, yeah. Jared Healy does too.
It's a destroyation. And it's paying homage. It's like on the cricket now, all of us defer to the other one, but when it's 2 for 222, we all look at each other, and I love Michael Vaughan. I love hearing Michael Vaughan say it, or Brian Lara say it, or Wasim Akram. Everyone knows it, but when you hear Richie, but in Brian Lara's accent, I think that's wonderful. So I think it's good to pay homage to those
Definitely.
In that respect.
So I'll occasionally say the umpire crosses himself, which was a Rex Huntism.
Right.
And that's definitely a Rex. He's the only one that used to say it. And there'll be times where you say something and you think, oh, gee, that sounded like Bruce, or that sounded... And so I think those little influences do come through. I think I always found, and football's exactly the same as race calling, in that I find we're like musicians. When you look at a musician's page and it'll say their influences.
Yep.
So they'll have 5 or 6 different influences, and they've taken samples from those people. And we're exactly the same. It's an art form, and we've listened, taken little samples, and then put it into our stuff, and then we've put ourselves in there, and that's what you get. And so, like what you said, it's subjective. So as a result, the fans are either going to like you or lump you, not even knowing who you are. They're just not going to like your style, or they're going to love your style. It's just the way it is. But I think we are very much an art form, and the greatest thing about it is you never get it right. So it makes you coming, for some reason, we want to come back the next week and do it and try and get it right, and we never will. We'll never get the perfect call.
I've never thought of it as an art form. Maybe the way you do it is an art form. Maybe the way I do it is not an art form. But where does this... You mentioned your dad. Tell me a little bit about your family and your upbringing before we get into the delicious fact that this is something you've wanted to do from a very young age, which is cool.
Well, I was just, like everyone, loved sport. So I was lucky in a way.
You grew up in Melbourne?
So I'm an Altona Meadows boy. And
so I should say the Ravi Shastri of Altona Meadows, right? It's just Altona then.
So no, western suburbs boy. And, Mum and Dad separated when I was younger, and Mum fought hard to buy a house in Altona Meadows. And
how old were you?
I would have been about 7 or 8.
Been pretty tough, I would have thought.
Yeah, and I think you, and as a result, I became very close to Mum, but the thing was, we had the best upbringing, really, because my brother and I, Tim, we were like street urchins back then, and kids in the 80s weren't they?
Yes, they were.
They were out on the street. We'd put tennis lines out on the road, and then when a car would come past, we'd stop serving, and then we'd start again, and, playing cricket with the kids next door, and kids would then come from afar because there's a massive cricket tournament on, and just what kids did, and then I would paint little advertising signs on bike ramps and ride my bike over it pretending it was a jumps race, that I was a jumps jockey, and I'd have a little racetrack in the lounge room, pencils end to end with horses going around, and I think the Melbourne Cup start at Flemington was just outside my bedroom, and I did a lap around the kitchen.
So how would you physically? What would you do to do the lap?
So I'd literally have a pencils end to end from the lounge room into the kitchen.
Yep.
And then the straight six at Flemington was the hallway. So I'd have horses going up the inside and up the outside.
How were the horses? Or you were just calling
They were little
them?
toy horses.
Right.
Little toy horses. I had little toy horses, and they'd go. And then the big cabinet was the grandstand, and a little picture frame was the winning post. And then I'd literally cut out little advertisements out of the paper and stick it onto the winning post for advertisements. And
Brilliant.
the ruler was the semaphore board because it had numbers on it, and then had little steeplechase races. And so I just...
So were you calling as you went?
As they went around commentating it all. And
How old are you at this stage?
Oh, I've been 10,
Right.
And you're in the same boat. We're lucky because we came from the era where you had to listen to things. You had to listen to the footy. You had to listen to the races. So I'd be stuck in my bedroom just listening to the radio and just spellbound by it, listening to the goals getting kicked. And it would be so exciting when there was a sellout because Channel 7 had put the game on live, and back in that era. And so... even though I wouldn't say we didn't go without, but we didn't have an affluent upbringing, but at the same time, Grandma loved Footscray. So we went to every Footscray game. We'd get in the bus to
Western
Waverley
Oval?
Park, Western Oval.
So
get
tell
in the
me
bus to Waverley
about
Park.
a day. So what years are we talking? We're talking the 80s.
So we're going, late 80s to say mid-90s.
With your grandma?
My grandma's best friend is a lady named Hazel. And they'd have to park at the Footscray YMCA because, of course, Whitten Oval, the parking was pretty ordinary. And we'd park at the Footscray YMCA, and we'd walk. We'd walk about 5 blocks.
Whose number would be on your back?
Probably Dougie's, I reckon.
Dougie Hawkins, yep.
But we were walking along, and you'd always have the little sellers of the records on the street corners, because there was no car parking. And then by the time you got to the gate, the one thing I did love about the football, the little memories from those grounds, was you always knew the people you stood around.
Yes.
In that you didn't know their names, or you maybe knew their names, but you only knew them from the football.
It still happens
Yeah.
in the West.
Sure.
So if you're a Fremantle Docker member, you sit in the same seat
Yes.
and you've got the same person next to you. A little bit at Geelong too, because the people
Sure.
come down from the Western Districts.
Yes.
But for general footy supporters, you don't have that, do you?
So my
now?
grandma would say, for instance, at a shopping centre, "Oh, that's Joan. No, I go to the football with her." So what that meant was Joan sees her at half time with the fruitcake, and she sits a couple of seats down, in the forward pocket at Whitten Oval. But then, of course, what would happen is you'd only be 3 or 4 levels from the fence. So on the other side of the ground, all you knew that there was something going on. The crowd were going ape droppings on the other side of the ground. But you couldn't see what was going on,
Yes.
But that was footy. That's how we knew it. And then, of
Yes.
course, going to the MCG was a big deal. And
Waverley would have been a big deal.
I loved Waverley. I loved it, getting in the bus with Gran. But then the alternative was to go to the races with Grandad, who loved a punt. So
What was your granddad's name?
his name was Norman. He was a barber.
Norman.
Norman.
So did he introduce you to the...
No. So after mum and dad separated a few years
still
later.
keep in touch with your dad or not?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. He lives in Queensland. But my mum dated a horse trainer for a while, Jack Dalton, who's still around. He's got a few horses in Bacchus Marsh.
Jackie Dalton.
And we'd go to the races with his horses. He had a small group of horses, Mortlake, Dunkeld, in the back of the horse float, and I hated it. I thought, these stinky animals, what are we doing this on a weekend for?
So this with you and your mum?
Yeah, we're all together. I'm thinking, I just want to watch the footy replay at 6 o'clock. What are we doing this for?
Got to get back for Sandy on the Drew Morford.
Exactly. Like, we joined Bruce McAvaney at Princes Park halfway through the second quarter, and your commentators Bruce McAvaney and Peter McKenna.
These are back in the days, kids, where you say, what is he talking about? When they go round the grounds.
That's right.
And they'd be broadcasting one game, there'd be 5 other ones on, so you had to listen, and you'd leave it, let's go out to, whoever it would be.
Ian Robertson.
At Waverley. The Hawks are down by 3 points. There's 10 minutes to go in the third quarter, and you wouldn't hear for another 15 minutes. And it's like, has Dunstall kicked any? And we're back in front. It was a freaking nightmare.
And what about the days they were the days when there would have been games that weren't broadcast or replayed.
Yes.
So on Sports World on the Sunday, they'd show the video of, say, Footscray v Fitzroy, and it was like some home video had taken it, which, of course, when Fox came along...
And people complain now, there's not enough footage. It's like, what do you want? Every game in 4K? Like, come on.
It's so true. But that was the footy, wasn't it, back then? But then Granddad... So Norman was a barber.
Right.
Normie was a barber. And when I started to like racing, so I remember Jack had a horse at Flemington one day and Mum had the race book, and I can remember pinching the race book out of her hand. And I can remember the race times for every race, and I was obsessed, absolutely obsessed by it.
Were you able to bet on the horses, or betting wasn't part of it?
Mum put the bets on for me, but of course.
What a legend.
No, of course.
What's your mum's name?
Sue.
Oh,
yeah,
good on you, Sue.
Yeah, but so we look, as I say, it was the imagery. It was everything about it. It was the track. It was the movement. It was the Greg Miles's voice over the PA. It was the colour. It was at the football. It was the cheer squad, the siren, the scoreboard. It was just all, So I think, as a 12-year-old, 11-year-old kid going, what an upbringing, and that imagery, and taking in all of the commentary. And so I was obsessed to do it, really.
So typically when there's athletes sitting here, I ask the question at this point, okay, at what stage X did you think being a cricketer, footballer, tennis player, soccer player could be a profession? So at what age or stage? Because there's some cracking videos, which we'll play some audio of at this point now. Tommy will whack it in, but there's some cracking video of you as a kid with famous race callers sort of shadowing them. But at what stage prior to that did you think, oh, hang on? Because it's not being a horse race caller is not a, when you're in year 7 at school, it's not a typical profession to be aiming for. No.
Do you know what? It's interesting you've asked me that question, because in my mind, remembering, it was always going to be what I did.
Even when you were around the lounge room with your toy horses?
Well, I was just determined. So when I was 15, I was going to school and...
What were you like at school?
I was okay. Yeah, I was okay. I liked English and things. I wasn't an absolute superstar, but I wasn't bad at it. Okay. I was middle of the road. And I liked things like economics and accounting and stuff. But Mum said, what do you want for your birthday, 15th birthday? And I said, I loved race books. I loved the race books you get. You don't sort of get them much anymore at the tracks every day nowadays, but I used to collect them. And I said, I want the Melbourne Cup race book, because I didn't go to the Melbourne Cup. But she goes, what do you want that for? I can't get you a trampoline or something, Anyway, so unbeknownst to me, she rung up the Victoria Racing Club, and a man by the name of Grant Birrell said, what does your son want to do? And she said, he loves Greg Miles. He wants to be a race caller. And my birthday happened to fall on a Flemington race meeting, and they organised me to sit in the box with Greg on my 15th birthday.
Well, that's a fantastic piece of work from that person at Flemington.
Yeah, for sure.
That's going above and beyond.
Oh, for sure. And so I rocked up in my little suit and tie and sat, and I was mesmerised for 3 races, didn't say a word. Greg actually...
Well, you sat up there in the
box, right there, in the chair right next to Greg, in the box I use today.
Same box?
Same box, and the chair is still sitting there waiting for a young buck to come and watch me.
Right, well, there's a lot of young people listening, mate. You're going to have lined up literally down the Flemington Straight. Come to Cup Carnival now.
Greg always, was very funny about people in the box. Don't move, don't say anything, because we've got to concentrate. He said I sat there just as quiet as a church mouse. In fact, he had to make me talk. I was mesmerised by what he was doing. And I remember walking out that day, and I got quite emotional with my mum. She said, do you want to be a race caller now? I said, oh, bloody oath, I'm obsessed now, And so from that point on, I remember I got to the end I did my year 12, and I could have gone into university, but there were a few little jobs. I worked as a race caller lackey at RSN, basically putting the cords into the microphones for Greg on a Sunday and making his coffee for him. I think I got paid $45 or something to do that. I worked at the Meadows Greyhounds. As the dogs come out, I'd introduce the dogs to the crowd. I think I got paid $51.
So you're on the microphone at that point?
On the microphone, dressed up to the nines,
Dressed up to the 9 at the Meadows?
Yeah, number 1 is Awesome Assassin, trained by Mark Howard, last start winner here. Number 2 is, Matt Hill. And I would do that for $51. And I remember the Kilmore Trotting Trials. Mum would drive me to the Kilmore Trotting Trials. It'd be 21 trials and we get paid $40. It wasn't even worth the petrol, but, so all that sort of stuff I did. And when I was 18, after I finished school, that wasn't enough. So I actually applied for the dole for like 12 months. Because I was, as they would say in the movie world, I was an out of work race caller, trying to get that one break,
And are you sitting in front of the TV and practicing? Or
Yes, I was going to the races, trots every Saturday night, Flemington races every time.
And what would you do?
Call into a tape recorder, into a dictaphone back then. We
So
didn't
tell
have
me
mobile
about
phones.
that, like in a little box?
Yeah,
Or?
so I'd use a spare box. There's still spare boxes at the races now. In fact, there's 5 spare boxes at every racetrack in Melbourne.
And you just sit up there?
Sitting there with my dictaphone, call every race into a tape recorder, give it to the race callers to critique.
Do you have any of those tapes?
I do.
Tommy, we need to play one of those.
Oh yeah, I'll give
Just
Tommy.
press a play on something,
Yeah,
record on your phone, and send
yeah,
it to us.
Yeah.
Because I want to know about what.
The
type of
only
question
thing
you make.
is,
yes,
in this wonderful high-tech world,
Yeah.
do you have a tape recorder?
Tommy will sort something out. He's a very, very industrious young man, is Tommy. Okay. Before this episode, at this point, you're now going to hear a young Matt.
29.6 was the third quarter. 8 metres away, then to Chestervale Spur capitulating. Going past it now was Bullinger Tealsby, followed by Jessica Joe. Twinkle Camilla, favourite punters. You're in trouble. Cannonball Run goes up to it. Cannonball Run up to Twinkle Camilla, trying to fight on. Driving very, very hard here, Max Wishart. Cannonball Run. It's coming back, Twinkle Camilla. Cannonball Run. Twinkle Camilla. No horse will give an inch. No driver will give an inch. Cannonball Run just in front and wins it. Cannonball Run.
So you would practice.
Yep. Practice, and I'd go home and I'd listen to them and I'd think, maybe 4 out of the 8 calls I could have that someone listen to that, the other 4 tape over them, and the next Saturday rock up and do it over and over again. And there was always at Moonee Valley there was 1 spare box. So there was 5 race callers boxes, but 1 spare box. So we'd all the young callers would fight to get there, and some of us would get there at Sparrows at like 7 a.m. to get the full day's experience, and if 4 people rocked up, we'd have to divvy it off. But the guy that got there first called the big race, got to practice the big race.
Right.
Yeah.
So you'd get there right at the start of the day.
Like 7 a.m.
Even earlier than we get there at Fox Footy on Thursday night.
Yeah, we would get there just so I could. So, and of course, it was always that big disappointment. You're revved up, call 8 races practice, and you walk in, and some other bugger's set up there. And
He's all ready to go. He's beating your time.
Early bird beat me, So, but the thing is, I was always destined to want to do it, and the loveliest thing is I had buy-in from my mum and my grandparents. They lived the dream with me. And then when I was 19, Sky Racing put out a scholarship for young race callers, and I won it.
So what was involved in the process
so that
of
was
that?
literally applying, sending a race call, having an interview in Sydney, and it was the John Tapp scholarship.
How do you find out that you're the recipient? Take me back.
I got a phone call. from John Tapp. God bless Tapp.
Himself?
From himself. Matt, I'm very happy to tell you that you're the recipient of the John Tapp Scholarship. And for me, it was high excitement, but also nervousness, because at 19, I had to, who was very wet behind the ears, I can tell you, moved to Sydney. And so I packed my Ford Telstar, but with my life.
Drove up the Hume.
And I thought, oh, geez, I'm homesick as hell. I'll see the year scholarship out and we'll see what happens after that. Was there for 16 years. Was at Sky for 16 years.
And what's the scholarship entail? Like what?
Everything. So I even learned, I had a day in makeup to learn how to tie a tie.
I missed that day. I still need that day.
But a day of learning production, learning to interview. We had days on air, and then days at the track calling 1 or 2 races here and there to the dogs, trots, and the thoroughbreds. And then after that year, I was given full-time employment and was, I suppose, technically the number 3 race caller for thoroughbreds at that point, and ended up taking over Ian Craig's role, who was the main caller for Sky in 2009, and did that for 6 years. So I got to call some of the, those great Sydney races,
Absolutely.
like the Doncaster and Golden Slipper.
So to take it one step back from that, what is the first official race in your mind that you called?
First official race was a 2-horse race at the Hillsville Picnics.
2 horse?
2 horses.
Well, that's got to make it easier.
Makes it harder because you've got nothing else to say.
Right, but at least you know who the 2 are.
That's true. That is true. You wouldn't want to get it wrong. But
so it was
at
Hillsville.
Hillsville Picnics. I think I was 16. And my first ever meeting was a place called Poonkerry, which was this little town about a 400 population.
So Mum's had to take you there?
Mum drove me there all the way. It's 2 hours above Mildura.
Oh, so it's a long way from Altona Meadows for Ravi Shah Street.
No, absolutely. I was a long way from home. But the reality was the year before, the whole thing was a debacle because the caller didn't show up and the publican thought, I'll have a go at this.
Just
So
I'll
know from the pub, or someone's got to have a crack, they're all shoulders to the wheel because it's the local race meeting, and they get a good crowd and the farmers flying in their little aeroplanes.
And he didn't bring the sizzle.
First race was a bit of a debacle, and it turned into race caller karaoke for the day. I'll have a go, I'll have a go, I'll have a go. So the whole thing was an absolute cluster. And they thought, well, we can't get Greg Miles to come up or, Bill Collins. Well, who do we get? So they rang RSN, and I was putting tapes in, and the program manager said, well, why don't you give this kid a chance, And that was my first meeting, and I was on my way. And
were you edgy?
Yeah. No, again, I loved it. I loved it. And yeah, of course, you're over a public address for the first time. And when you're calling meetings like that, Howie, when you're on a scaffolding and the crowd's literally there, because you get some pretty quick instant feedback if you've stuffed it up.
Not as positive as the gram that we went through earlier on.
At least at Moonee Valley, I'm on the roof. I don't get much feedback up there because I'm nowhere near anyone. But it was everyone has always been very polite though, and I'd call meetings. I went to a place called the Lang Lang Greyhounds where they'd have 100 races, the 2-dog races up the straight, and literally call on the top of the cafeteria. If I banged my leg too hard, my left leg would have gone through into the cafeteria with the poor old lady selling the hot dogs, and you'd do it for $25, and Mum, I remember the Lang Lang dog's mum would drive me. Granddad
Where's
wanted Lang Lang's near Cranbourne, past Cranbourne,
okay.
and it's
delightful
little dog track, and Granddad had worked the bar just for give him something to do, and he'd puff out his chest. My grandson's the race caller, They were great days,
what a
good
legend.
fun. You think back at it. My mum always said to me, isn't it sad that your granddad never heard you call the Melbourne Cup? But he was from a town called Nil, which is halfway from Melbourne to Adelaide, and I called a Nil Cup, and he couldn't have been more proud. I was about 18. So he heard me do that, which would have been more important than the Melbourne Cup to him anyway.
So I've asked you these questions. I ran through your schedule before, but when we started doing the footy, so typically at the moment you're doing the races on a Wednesday, but it can be anywhere in Victoria.
Yeah.
So it could, like you were at Sale the other day, and etc. And then you're doing Thursday night footy on Fox on a Thursday night. Then what happens on a Friday?
Radio footy.
Then on a Saturday, there's
Horses.
the city meeting.
Yep.
So I don't know much about horse racing. So I'll tell you a side story about that in a moment. And then on the Sunday, you're back on Fox.
Yep.
And so Monday, Tuesday is yours.
Monday's just about a write-off.
Right.
Monday's sleep.
Right. You're a big lunch man, though, aren't you?
Oh, I like lunches. I find
You're
them
a long
enjoyable.
lunch man. You're a bit of a throwback.
I do find them enjoyable.
You and
when
your
you've
racing cronies,
How good
yeah?
is it though when you've got nothing else on and you can go to lunch? I find
I've got
that
kids. I don't know. I don't relate to that statement, mate. I just don't.
Well,
but you,
no, I do
you
have
go
a
to
little bit
big
of a throwback.
lunches, yeah?
Yeah, I do like a lunch. I was probably taught by the best. A few of those guys, like Greg Miles, a race caller, loves a lunch. And I think it's a bit of a Melbourne thing too, a bit of a long lunch in the sports.
So where do you
world.
go into the casino or somewhere?
Oh,
don't
there'd
you?
be some nice restaurants or a pub.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you sit there and watch races at the
Oh,
pub?
no, God, no. No,
Okay.
no. We solve the problems of the world.
Okay, I
Howie.
bet you do. So it's a busy schedule, and we've had a brief conversation about this because I know what I go through to make sure I know the players in a game of football, of which there are only 40 odd, and you've seen most of them. Take me through, because I thought it was all done in the pre, but you explained to me it wasn't. So take me through, not a carnival event, a day's racing at Flemington on a Saturday. Tell me about your day, what it entails, and how you get ready to know the horses in the race. Because for those of us that don't do it, it seems inconceivable that you would. So on a typical metropolitan meeting, how many horses race?
About 120.
So to me, I immediately think, right, that's 120 different horses I have to identify. How the hell would I do that? Do you have a photographic memory or not?
It's all about photographic memory, the lot of it. So race callers, we fly by the seat of our pants. It's edgier seat stuff, but at the same time, we're trained to learn and forget. So when I started back in those days,
Is
when
there
I was
any
15,
tricks to it?
16, not really.
Okay,
no,
sorry, go on.
No, 15, 16, it was literally sit there between races, learn.
Was there 40 minutes between a race?
Yeah, 40 minutes between a race.
But what are you learning?
The colour and the name
Of the
jockey.
But the horses' names.
Yeah, so as soon as you say a horse's name that's running on the weekend, I could tell you, blue, white sash, yellow cap, they get ingrained in your brain. And the most important time for a race caller is when the jockey mounts up. So
have you done anything before your Flemington meeting on a Saturday?
Yes.
Have you looked at fields?
Yes.
So take it back. You start looking at
so
fields?
we do the form first. Well, I do the form first. So I have a look at it's an old kickback from, the 3DB radio days of the 50s, that the race caller tips. All race callers have to tip. So
you do tips?
We do that. Give our selections for every race that gets sent to the TAB, into racing.com, etc.
So I hear this. I'll give you an example of my lack of horse knowledge, just so we can establish how simply you're going to have to talk to me. Back in the days at Channel 7, they had the Cox Plate, and Sunline, read by Greg Childs, was going for a third Cox Plate?
Yep, that'd be right.
Right. So
she won two.
Well, she is the very important term you've used here, because I was sent out as a young man at 7 to interview Greg Childs what it would mean to win a third Cox Plate. And very first question, what is it about him that makes this horse so good? And Greg Childs replied, well, for a start, he is a she. That was my introduction to racing. And I took the tape back to the boss. He said, how'd it go? I said, well, the interview went well because he got so emotional that he cried. He said, oh, it's great. I said, but you're going to have to edit the start, because I called the great race horse a he rather than a she. So that's the entry level of where we're coming into this, Hilly. So when you are studying the form, I hear this. What does that mean? What are you doing?
That means, like we would do, get the narrative of a footballer. It's the narrative of the horse, isn't it? So it's who trains it, where they sit in the run, are they favourite, are they not favourite, who's riding.
And you're doing this for 100 horses?
Yep, do it for the whole meeting.
How long does that take?
So that takes a good 2 or 3 hours to do a form for a race
Do
meeting.
you like that or hate it with a passion?
I enjoy trying to work out who's going to win the race. So doing the form, you're not doing it just to, you're getting a result by trying to work out who you think's going to win the race. And that makes it even more interesting, because you've got a vested interest then.
Are you allowed to bet on the races that you call?
Yeah, we're allowed to bet. I'm not a great gambler, but I do enjoy a bet.
Okay.
If you said to me, when's the last time you had a bet? It was probably a month ago, but I do generally like to have a bet.
Do you give those horses a bit of extra fizz in the call?
Oh, not really. No, you might kind of look for it a little bit more, but yeah, you do. So you work out the whole narrative of the race, but then as you are learning them, you're learning the colours at the same time. But the most important thing, I print the colours out the day before, have a sieve through those. But then on the Saturday, and it might be like Anzac Day, we've got racing as well. You'll have 2 meetings in a row sometimes, but it's when the jockeys are walking out into the yard and they get on their horses, that's when you cement them. So you just really learn them, and you probably learn them for 5 minutes. I've got to a stage, and the race callers that have done it for a long time.
You're looking through the binoculars at them?
Looking through the binoculars at them in the mounting yard.
At the colour of the silks?
Colour of the silks.
So not that the horse has got a white patch on it?
A grey horse helps, because when they're a long way away, a grey horse. But you remember with a racetrack, those horses are a kilometre away.
Yeah.
And you're looking through binoculars the whole time. So you have to look at the colours, and it sounds arrogant to say it, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Oh, no, I can relate to that.
Because you've done it for like 20 years,
Yeah.
So by the time the jockeys have mounted up, and by the time they've got from the mounting yard to the barriers, they're in my brain. And then I can talk, and then that work that I've done earlier on about the narrative of the race, that's when that comes out as they're moving into the stalls.
So I can only relate it to, it doesn't relate to cricket to me, it relates to football. So if you're calling football on the radio, there's certain things you need to do reasonably often, almost as a template, which you would understand, people listening would understand if they thought about it, but mention the score as often as you can.
Yep.
Who's got the ball? Where is the ball? That's basically the three
The
things.
score is the number one rule, because
score.
there's so many times you turn the radio on and you can't hear the score.
It does my head in when it's 5 minutes later.
And the problem is, as a caller, you feel you're saying it too much,
Yes.
but you can't say it
But
too
no one has ever said, oh, you mentioned the score.
That's right, that's true.
So that's the score. That's who's got the ball. That's where the ball is on the ground. Are there certain things in a race call that are just part of the fabric of what you need to do? Like, do you have to call every horse?
You do. Yeah. Well, you want to, because everyone's had a bet on that horse or has an interest in that horse.
Yep.
And different countries have different ways of doing it. Australia have always set the standard of how to call a horse race, but you always have to say where they are. So it's similar to the geography of the ball. And race calling's probably changed a little bit because TV's taken over now, but it's still broadcast on radio. So you still have to say that they're at the 900, they're at the 400.
So what you're calling is on TV and radio at the same time?
It's on the same time.
Okay.
So it's a set call. And the difference between, I suppose, a sports caller and maybe a race caller is when the gates open to the winning post, it is just a flat-out call. You are calling a race. So, there are things like, and you can throw in a few little different things like the Dean Street side at Moonee Valley or the clock tower at Flemington, maybe mix it up a little bit. But the difference between a horse race and, say, a footy game is we're calling, we get our little spurts of calling, but then there's also those opportunities to weave a narrative through. We don't get that in a horse race because you've got 16 runners in a minute and a half. You've just got to call what you see,
And what happens if partway through you make a slight error or a fumble? Like, how quickly do you have to put it behind you and gather yourself up?
Keep going.
Right, you just plough on.
And this is something I know you and I have discussed this, once it's out there, it's out there. Sometimes in a race call, I'll correct myself because it makes me feel better.
Yep.
If you've a name, you might have called something, Michael's Lass instead of Michael's Miss or something like that.
Just such an easy thing to do with 100 different options for the day. I can't get my head around it.
It happens, and I genuinely think Australian race callers have made it look quite easy to the extent where people don't realise. In fact, I had someone come up into the box one day and thought that the names would just come up on a screen for us to talk. And of course that doesn't happen. In fact, race calling hasn't changed in 100 years.
So how often do you have to look down at the record, so to speak, when you see the red horse and you don't? You've just got it.
Yeah,
it's
very
phenomenal.
rarely. But race calling hasn't changed. It's literally a bench with a set of binoculars, a steel swivel, and do your best. And it's very raw. It's the rawest form of sports broadcasting.
And you're there. That's the thing that freaked me out. You're there by yourself all day.
Yep.
So no one comes up and says g'day, or
but we're also the radio caller. And we have to do crosses to the radio all day. I do a couple of pre-recorded Channel 7 pieces for the day, racing.com pieces as well. And we're the course broadcaster. So what we call the Lost Kids announcements. There's a young boys presented at the secretary's office here. Where his parents do all of that.
So how many invoices do you put in one day?
None.
Oh, it's all
that's
used
to be like that. Used to be like that. It's all.
It's all
I think race
centralised.
Used to live off the old four invoice day.
Okay, what Tommy? We're going to need to pull this up now. So, what was the first Melbourne Cup you called?
2017 was rekindling.
We'll get Tommy to pull up in a moment. We'll have a listen to it. But
and as you can see, compared to the tone of the voice in the previous tape that we played, thank God the plums dropped because I was like Chipmunk City earlier on.
People like Cometti has a magnificent voice. Like, I hear my voice and think, well, that's not the voice you would choose for sports broadcasting. But you have a voice that I think you would choose for sports broadcasting.
Yeah, and
Is
I don't know
something you
how,
worked on, or it's just you? Because you sound like that when you talk.
Yeah, no, it's nothing that's just developed. But voices are interesting because I think you're lucky because your voice has got a boyish enthusiasm that naturally whatever you say sounds like you're just into it.
Well, thank you.
You could call frogs crawling up a wall and it sounds like, geez, Howie's really into this because it's a boyish. You got this voice that's got like a love for sport, and it it's a great thing.
But in the 70s or 80s, in that more stylized, English-based, rounded voice, there's no way I would have got a job in sports commentary, but I think things have certainly changed now, So before we play some of this, and we don't need to listen to the full 3200, Tommy, we might bring it sort of round to the straight, but before we get to that, what is you've called 1,000 million races at this stage, but your first Melbourne Cup, so this is now, you get the Melbourne Cup wrong. You may call 25,000 races in your career, Matthew, and you've still got many Melbourne Cups ahead of you. And it's not a nice thing to say, but let's be honest. If you call your 23rd Melbourne Cup and butcher it, that is what you will be remembered.
Oh, for sure. And the one thing you'll note, if I can do a weather girl point here, there are four sets. The first thing I've seen, as you've shown that, is the owner, Lloyd Williams, had 6 runners in it. So he had the same set of silks with a different coloured cap.
He's the dark blue and white, isn't he?
So 1, 2,
Yeah, right.
3, 4. There's another one in there somewhere.
So what type of... How are you feeling the day of the Melbourne Cup and 5 minutes before the Melbourne Cup? Is it another race or is there some tension involved?
The thing about the Melbourne Cup is that we don't do anything differently to any other race. Could be 24 runners in the middle of June, and we do exactly the same thing.
The audience is a bit
The only thing
larger.
is the audience is enormous, and people say, oh, the estimated audience is 20 million or whatever it is, but you could probably quadruple that because it gets watched over and over and over again as well.
Yes.
So you've got to be almost word perfect. But isn't it amazing when something's so important? Race calling's a concentration game. So as soon as those barriers open, I could have someone trying to, push me over or hit me with a bat or something, and I wouldn't know they were there. My concentration is just, zeroed right in, over 100%. It's just concentrate. And I think with the Melbourne Cup, the first one, I didn't know what to expect because I dreamed of doing it. It was something I'm literally living the dream. And I remember walking onto the day, and Simon Marshall, champion ex-jockey, said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Look, 50% of me is really proud, but now 50% of me is I've got a job to do now, and I'm the man for it, so I've just got to get it done."
So got it done. Is there nerves before your first Melbourne Cup call?
I'm nervous before every Melbourne Cup. In fact, I get quite about 10 minutes before I get quite wound up.
Well, how does that manifest?
It's usually, what usually does it, because I love the Melbourne Cup as well. It's usually the national anthem. It's usually the chairman holds the cup up. So I get a bit teary when that happens. And then I just try and think, well, I'm calling it to one person. And I try and say, well, okay, I'm locked in a box. Because if you start thinking about the crowd,
yes,
you'd never do it.
No,
you'd never do it.
You wouldn't.
So I just imagine Mum driving over the Westgate Bridge and I'm telling her what's going on. One person, and so that's what I try and do. And it's one of those things that, like it's like anything. People would probably say it when they get married or these big life events, the build up. I get to a stage on Melbourne Cup and it's like, oh, can we just get on with it?
Yeah.
There's 10 races, but I just can't wait to get behind the microphone because I'm sick of talking about it. I do about 40 radio interviews the 2 days before to all places around the country, and I'm thinking, I have talked about this race over and over again. Can we just get on with it? And that's what it feels like now.
Let's get on with it. And I love that you're calling to your mum. Let's have a listen to the last 400 probably here.
Marmello straightened for home, approaching the 400 metres. Johannes Vermeer moves up with Tiberian. Max Dynamite then rekindling, followed by Big Duke. Johannes Vermeer takes the lead. 200 metres to go. Johannes Vermeer in front, but here comes rekindling. Johannes Vermeer rekindling. Max Dynamite back to the inside at the 100. Johannes Vermeer rekindling, wearing it down. Johannes Vermeer and rekindling, stride for stride. Rekindling has won the Emirates Melbourne Cup. From in second place, Johannes Vermeer. Third, Max Dynamite. Then came Big Duke. Next to King.
So when I listen to that, I immediately think Johannes Vermeer. Not words we're familiar with. They probably are to you because you know the horse well. But I immediately hear that and think, I could trip over that. Johannes Vermeer. And if I trip over it with 100 to go, I'm still gathering up when rekindling crosses the line. So how do you feel about your first Melbourne Cup call listening back?
Well, I think it was one of those. I actually was happy with it because I felt like I was in control the whole way.
Okay, it didn't get away from you.
I didn't think that I'd run out of breath or that I was sounding nervous or anything like that. I think I just got it done. But what was really interesting about the race was that you noticed the two Lloyd Williams horses finish together. So a lot of the time you're just thinking in the back of your head, well, I hope I've got the right cap here, I hope I've got the right horses, And
she's a fairly major cock up if you haven't, Guru. Heavens above.
So, you're always just... and, of course, the other thing about the race is you're taking it in like everybody else. You've got expectations. You've got thoughts that might happen, and when two Lloyd Williams horses go stride for stride, I think, I wasn't really expecting that. So you're taking it all in at the same time. So, no, I've been happy with the Melbourne Cups, and I think it's one of those events that you just zero in on so much.
Yep.
I'm very proud of them because it's like a little a little bit of. It's like my grand final every year. I find that going to the races on a Wednesday at Sandown when it's 5 degrees and they're bad horses and you're travelling to Sale and Mornington and things, and you've got a prize at the end of the year to reward you. You're going to call the Melbourne Cup, you know.
Well, let's have a look at last year's Melbourne Cup, Tommy, because I want to ask you about calling photos. We had a brief discussion about this the other day, and I was just listening back to your Melbourne Cup call. So Tommy will pull this one up in a moment.
Photo finishes, they're the bane of our existence as a race caller.
Well, let's have a look, listen, and then I want to ask you about why that is the case. All right, so this is last year's. This is the 2024 Melbourne Cup, called by the Ravi Shastri of our Tony Meadows. That'll do, Tommy. Let's have a good listen. Put the headphones on, Huey.
Next on the inside, waited with Fancy Man under pressure. Then came mostly cloudy Manzoids. Buckaroo sweeping up around the outside, about 6 off the lead, followed by Vauban. Land Legend goes to the front with Akita Sushi on the outside. Then Zardozi back behind those Circle of Fire. Fancy Man, and from a long way back, Buckaroo. It's Akita Sushi. Zardozi a length away on the inside, wearing it down. Akita Sushi grabbed by Zardozi. Knight's Choice is coming through at any old price, and Warp Speed as well. Zardozi grabbed by Knight's Choice, and Warp Speed coming at it. Knight's Choice, Warp Speed, they hit the line. It's a photo finish. Knight's Choice, I reckon's one from Warp Speed in a photo.
So the thing that I loved about that, Knight's Choice is coming through at any old price. So to me, that knows nothing about racing, I'm like, oh, right, this is a long shot. This is cool. So you've gone Knight's Choice, I reckon. So to me, I want to talk about photos, but to me, when you've said I reckon, if I've said I reckon in a call, it means I'm pretty sure, but I'm not 100% sure. Is that what I reckon means to you? And what's it like waiting for the photo of the Melbourne Cup when you've declared the winner?
I always say I reckon because I think my job is to sort of give an opinion of what I've seen, you know. And if it was the biggest is, so have a look at the headgear on the horse on the outside. This big yellow blinkers. So it almost
your eyes are drawn to it.
Your eyes are drawn to it in a finish like that. And our job is to very quickly go, well, who's won the race? You know?
Are you directly across the line or not?
So this is the thing. So the photo finishes. So I've always said there are 3 options as a race caller. You have so say I got that wrong.
Yes.
Oh, they would have, oh God.
What would have happened?
They would have been written up in newspapers and climbed over me, and everyone that ran into in 6 months would have said, you got that photo wrong. They would have just been at me, and every punter in the world thinks Matt Hill's the worst caller in the world. And no, it would have been a disaster, right? So that's your option. You get it wrong.
So you go for it, but you get it wrong.
Get it wrong. You're the worst in the world, right?
Right.
Second option is, like in that race, they hit the line, photo, leave it out. Leave it to the judge.
Just leave it the photo.
500,000 people go, what race are you looking at? The one on the fence is won, you know.
He's an idiot. He didn't declare it.
He's an idiot. He just didn't declare. I mean, I could see that in my lounge room, you know, in Gympie, that horse has won, right? Or you go to get a photo right where the margin's that, and I get no blowback at all.
Just nothing.
No. No.
So how
occasionally someone might say, "Oh, good call, yeah."
That Melbourne Cup there. How long between you've said Knight's Choice, I reckon, till it's confirmed? How long is that?
20 seconds.
And
they put the photo straight up.
What's that 20
usually.
seconds like?
Well, usually you run through the rest of the field. I thought he'd won. I was pretty sure he'd won. The thing that was the I reckon was those bloody yellow blinkers.
Yes.
You know, but. The thing about photo finishes, again, what race callers don't ever get a chance to say, is that I don't actually care where I call the race from because we're near the line, but what we were just watching then is not what I saw.
So you see a completely different angle.
Yeah, because I'm 3 broadcast boxes down.
From the camera.
I always laugh when it comes to, you know, but you might be calling tennis or AFL or whatever sport it is. The commentators have got a monitor there in front of them that they're watching live pictures as well. We make sure it's live so we can see what the punter is seeing. Racing's different. I could name 7 racetracks where the camera is nowhere near me.
So you're looking live through the binoculars on one angle, and I'm at home watching on a completely different angle.
You're at home, but 20 million people are at home as well watching what you're watching. So it's never going to change. That's the way racetracks are built and that's the way it is. But I think when it comes to those scenarios where, what's he talking about? You know, the outside's one for sure. I might not have seen what they're seeing.
Got you.
You know. So unfortunately, it's an opinion game, and we're going to get smashed either way, and you just have to put up with it because you just know. And the other thing, Howie, is it's still the main sport that is run by the fact that people punt on it.
Yes.
So you're affecting their hip pocket. You come and say Howard's won for sure, and it hasn't. People feel blighted by that,
Yes.
and I get it, you know.
So one more question on racing. Tell me about a race that in your mind you've made a mess of and how you deal with that when the next race is 40 minutes down the pike going to come.
There'll be races. It wouldn't even be a race I've made a mess of. Any race that I thought I didn't call well, I've made a meal of in some respects.
Have you had any monumentals or not?
When I was younger, I had like a mental block in a race. That was the worst thing ever. Horse called Mascaba, 6 lengths in front. Had no idea what it was.
So what do you do?
Just padded and got it on the line.
Better start Googling Mascara.
You know, but see, things will go on in a race call that even, you know, I might have missed a horse in the run or misnamed it or a photo finish wrong or, you know, there are always little things that I've always said this. Bruce McAvaney once said, and I think it probably sums up how much energy we put into it. He said, "You'll never leave a broadcast box happy." And very rarely do I throw the keys in the car at the end of a footy game or a race and think, oh, geez, that was perfect. I never do. I'm always thinking about the one thing you've done wrong. It's like the turd in the corner of a 50-metre swimming pool. The swimming pool might be glistening blue, but you're worried about the little turd in the corner. And that's how my mind works. I mean, I'll be the first to tell you after a footy tonight. I'll say, "Oh mate, I miscued with him, or I've called him the wrong name." I'd be the first to tell you.
Yep.
After I've called 400 players, fine. You know, it's just human nature.
So you took over the main race calling in Melbourne from
Greg Miles, who was the record-holding Melbourne Cup caller. He called 36 of them.
So MJ, who's produced this show from the start, who you met earlier on, his father, I don't think you mind me mentioning this, Darren James, long-term 3AW man. MJ came in here and said that his father was talking to Greg recently, and Greg said that you will go down as the greatest race caller that Australia's had. How does that strike you?
Well, it's lovely to hear it from Milesy because he was my hero. I think it's hard. It's like footballers and jockeys and horses. And
it's subjective, but there's someone that looks at every race call with a critical eye and understands better than 99.9% of the population what you're trying to do.
True, that's true. And that's really lovely to hear. I never knew Greg thought that, but geez, we've had some great callers like Bill Collins. I mean,
the accurate one.
The accurate one. You know, I mean, he.
This is what we're talking about, though.
Yeah.
I know nothing about racing.
Yeah.
All I know is he said Kingston Town can't win.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying in your caper.
That's right.
Like 9,999 perfect ones. One goat, my friend. And that's what you get pulled up for.
If we pulled up Kingston Town's race, honestly, you wouldn't have to know much about racing to watch that race go, well, it can't win. It's battling. You can tell, you know. And it was just like the horse heard him. As soon as he said it, Kingston Town's gone, no, stuff you. And he's gone.
Away.
But how Bill was so clever was if you watch that race back, as Kingston Town's flying up the straight, his words were thinking about the quick recovery, thinking about, oh my God, what have I just said?
Yeah.
He goes, he might win yet the champ.
Right.
And it's like,
which adds
well
to it.
Done you. You
well,
know?
I think it adds to it.
Of course it does.
His, for want of a better term, error, for a man that was known as the accurate one, you immediately think, right, the horse must have been absolutely cooked here.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So he was, you know, he was a dynamo. And Bill Collins was a bit of everything. He actually called the first ever grand final on television in 1955 and called Olympic Games. And if, you know, he called the Moscow Olympic Games in 1980 and inspired a young boy from Adelaide to call athletics. You know, he was his hero, and you know, we know what's become of Bruce. So, you know, Bill was a dynamo. Bert Bryant, those that don't remember, Bert was an entertainer. He'd crack jokes halfway through a race.
That's the type of thing I like. Bit of sizzle.
He was just sensational. Some of the stuff he'd get away with, you just wouldn't do it now. You just couldn't do it. It's too serious now. We've become too serious.
We have, unfortunately.
And maybe that's a good thing, because I don't know if I'd crack jokes between races
not
anyway.
A good thing, Matty. That's why every time I see you on a Thursday night, you, Jake and Kingy, the first thing I say is, tonight, boys, we have to bring the
sizzle.
That's right.
Bring the
because
sizzle.
we are in the entertainment
well, we are in
business.
it. And it's funny how a few people don't like that. But we are in the entertainment game, and if it's 50 points the difference, what do you want us to do? You know,
and that's where when I asked you who you love listening to, like on the radio, I love listening. I used to love listening to Rex. I love listening to James Brayshaw because they bring the sizzle. I'm watching it to be entertained, but other people are watching it purely to be informed. So, yeah, I get that. I asked you to do this. I now need you to list off every sport you have commentated, and then we're going to move on to your Olympic journey.
Okay, well, the thing about this is I think a few of them might not be sports, but we'll have a look here. So
just roll through the list.
Interestingly, there's a couple that I'd like to call, but I've never done it. So horse racing, harness racing, greyhound racing, AFL, equestrian, athletics, rowing, curling, speed skating, alpine skiing, luge, badminton, tennis, modern pentathlon, floorball, billiards.
Hang on, what's floorball?
Floorball's a Scandinavian indoor hockey.
What were you doing?
Yeah, World Championships.
You were in Scandinavia?
In Latvia.
Gosh, you were. Sorry, go on from floorball.
We can play that later if you
Righto.
like. Yeah, billiards, soccer, volleyball, beach volleyball, ice hockey, triathlon, Paralympic cycling, Paralympic goalball, Paralympic basketball, Paralympic rugby, canoe sprint, and dragon boat racing.
Where'd you do dragon boat racing?
At Moomba. When I was like 16. Does camel racing? I forgot about that. Camel racing was at Moonee Valley one day. I did that. And for a function, I did mouse racing. Does that count?
We were talking the other day and I said to you, 2028 LA, they were talking about playing the cricket in New York and it's just been announced they're going to play it in LA. First time cricket's been at the Olympics, and it's a 16 T20 comp. And I said to you, Matty, that's my aim down the track. I want to call the T20 at the Olympics. And you were saying, well, this is the bloke you need to get hold of. And then, like anything, you were explaining to me that the hardest thing about these gigs is getting on them. And once you get on them, you can't get off them. And it made me laugh. I went home and told Erica that you were telling me that you got to an Olympics at one point and your man said, well, you've got to do equestrian because you know about horses because you call horse racing. Yeah. I was like...
So I was stuck doing 14 days of dressage.
Because you call the horse racing.
Because I call races. Apparently I know something about a piaffe and an extended trot. I mean, seriously. But that's what it's like. It's I mean, there's been some great stories about, I think the Weather Girl commentated the archery on 2UE at the Sydney Olympics because they had no one else. And they said, want to have a crack at it, And there was a great story. George Grulovich was a race caller from Perth. He was an AFL caller, a bit of everything in West Australia. And he got asked for the radio network. No one was calling equestrian. I think the horse was Khyber TikTok that was going to win a gold for Australia. And on the final show jumping round, he had a crack at it, and it was one of the great calls of all time, So sometimes you just get the hot hand pass, and I got a hot hand pass in Rio to call beach volleyball within 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
5 minutes.
How does that happen, that it can be 5 minutes prior
someone was sick and got thrown in. And
are you at the venue or off Tube?
No, just off Tube. And
so you're quickly looking through the notes about who's rolling out.
So the only thing really in that scenario, and I did judo did judo. Which
you didn't put
the
that on the
funniest
list.
thing about judo was I got asked to do it. An Australian was competing in judo in London 2012, and I did his commentary very short notice, and it was very short notice, and the fight went for 21 seconds. He got flung over this bloke's shoulders, and that was the end of it. I think it was called a triple lip-on or something, which means he's gone, right? And 2 days later, Dan Lonigan from the ABC walked in and said, mate, I've got to call this judo fight, and apparently you're the man that knows something about judo. I said, I don't know anything about judo. So that's how you get the hot hand pass, but you've got to just make sure, if you're doing any different sport, you just got to know the terminology. So I got onto the old Google about beach volleyball, and I only had 5 minutes, so you just got to know that the line at the end's not a baseline, it's an end line and things like that. And then
because you can quickly be a fraud in front of an audience that loves that sport. They love beach volleyball like we love footy.
So this is the thing about the Olympic Games. This is the real hard challenge for any sports broadcaster or even an executive producer of an Olympics. They're a fascinating broadcast. There are certain sports, and I reckon the two that are the real, pardon the expression, curly ones are curling and equestrian. because 99.5% of the audience don't know what they're looking at. They haven't got the faintest. But the 0.5 that do are obsessed with it.
Well, there'd be a big curling community that want to smack you on the online if you get the curling wrong.
No
Guru.
doubt. No doubt. And they do, you know. But the thing is, we're not sort of catering for them, you know. So it's very difficult, you know. And that's where the Olympics, I find the Olympics fascinating away from just that, because I find how relevant where their relevancy is now. I find that interesting.
Yeah.
I find amongst the youngsters, I find the Olympics interesting. They're every 4 years. I think that's brutal. I think athletes mentally, it's brutal on them.
One chance, isn't it?
One chance, sometimes two. They get spat out after they've competed at an Olympics and they don't know where to go from there. And we sell a dream. The TV broadcast sell a dream.
Silver, you might get a LVA, you might get mentioned with some pictures in the background. I still go back to Magnussen in 2012, the missile, when he got beaten by Nathan Adrian by 1/100th of a second.
And he was he the Frenchman, Adrian?
Adrian was, no, I think he was American.
Yep.
But Magnussen was a favourite, and his silver was badged as a failure. He's got an Olympic silver medal in the blue ribbon swimming event by 1/100th of a second, and our country took it as a failure. I understand what you're saying about the Olympics. The great Josh Kay, who's been a wonderful researcher for Seven for a long, long, long time. He was Bruce's right-hand man alongside Shawnee.
Yep, Shawnee. Had Shawnee in the broadcast box.
He's a great
many
man,
times.
Shawnee, as is Josh Kay. He said, you need to ask Matt Hill. He was the one that said, you've got to get Matt Hill on the podcast. And he said, you need to ask him about what happened to him in Beijing, of which I know nothing. So that's a very open-ended question. What happened to you in Beijing?
So I was calling the Olympics, first Olympics, very excited.
So 08.
So this is 08.
Yep.
With Ray Hadley.
Oh, yeah.
And 2GB, and get there, all happy, raring to go. And I called rowing for a couple of days. I was there for a week, opening ceremony, all that stuff. And reporting for duty one morning, and felt shocking, like a bus had hit me. Just really, I couldn't do anything, you know. And I remember saying to the young producer, they're coming to me for an equestrian update. I don't know if I can do this. And next thing I'm on the floor, I'm gone. And
on the floor?
And a bio reports I seizured.
Oh.
So I get picked up in it. And there's one memory. A man you would have worked with very closely, Neil Kearney.
It taught me everything I know about putting together a television sports report.
So Neil Kearney,
a truly great man,
lovely, lovely man, had done earlier a report before the Olympics started on Taekwondo, some Taekwondo athlete, and decided to get in the ring with him and broke his arm.
I do remember this.
So
I remember
as I'm getting lifted out of the studio, I've got Neil Kearney standing at the door going, "You'll be right, mate. You'll be right, mate," with his arm. And he still remembers it, yeah. So I get to the hospital in Beijing, and we're thinking pneumonia maybe. Anyway, it was pneumonia, but it got worse and worse and worse. And to the extent where I can't remember much after that. But little things I do remember was the Chinese doctors saying that you've got pneumonia, you've got double pneumonia, and it's kicking in, it's spreading. And then team doctors came.
Australian team doctors. Ray Hadley had rung John Coates, who said, we need help. The two team doctors came, and I remember the last words from the male doctor was that you're going to be in a coma. We're going to induce you into a coma. And I'm thinking, thank God, you know, I couldn't breathe. I was in pain, all that. But before we do that, we just need to tell you that your mum loves you. So, okay, this is pretty serious stuff. Little did I know, she was told at the same time that if Matt makes the airvac flight from Beijing, they were going to take me to Hong Kong, put me in a plane to Hong Kong. If I make the flight, I'll live. I woke up with my brother and my dad looking over my bedside a few days later. Where?
And I was in Hong Kong. I made the flight, and I was intubated, so I couldn't speak. And it took them, I was on, apparently what had happened was when I got in there, I was under a professor, two professors, but one in particular who looked after SARS. And he just said, look, give him 4 sets of antibiotics and absolutely smash him with it. But there's this other new antibiotic, let's give him that as well, we might as well. bang, I started to slowly improve. I was in ICU, slowly. And the only thing was, as I was getting better, they could not work out what I had. And this man, who was a professor, sat next to me every night. How are you going, Matt? And I've got the tube and I go, he said, have you been around bats lately? No. Next night he'd rock up. Have you been around too many racehorses, or have you been with horses? No. Next night, have you been living in a cave? No, because he couldn't work it out. He'd be going home every night looking at his book, going, well, this is not making any. How's this kid getting better? So anyway, as I was getting a lot better, before I left the hospital in Hong Kong, he came in celebrating. Hooray, we've found out what you've had. It was from a swab taken in China when you were going down. He said you had malioidosis.
Which is?
Which is a airborne, I breathed it in somehow, 95% death rate of acute malioidosis. I got an odds-on favourite, well and truly beaten.
Wow.
What had happened was the 5th antibiotic saved my life, but it masked what I had.
The experimental one, the new one. And how prevalent is this thing? Not very.
No, it's Southeast Asia. It's prevalent. Sometimes Northern Australia.
How long from when you collapsed in the box to when...
A week.
Till you're back up and running?
Oh, sorry. It was a week from arrival in Beijing.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And how long from when you collapsed in the box to when you were getting put on a flight?
I was back in Australia.
No, into the special air flight.
Oh,
off to Hong Kong.
Yeah, like a day.
So
2 days.
just bang.
Yeah.
Just went whack.
Yeah.
So the cliche question, did this near-death experience change your perspectives at all?
It did for a while.
Yeah.
You know, putting the bins out meant nothing, you know. But I think growing up does that too. I tell you what it did do though. It made me it made me grow a lot mentally and psychologically. I came out of those Olympics thinking I'd failed. I honestly thought, fancy that happening to me. I'm a failure, you know. But the whole thing it wasn't, and I didn't even, the whole near-death thing wasn't worrying me. It was more, why didn't I finish the Olympic Games? So it made me, which was silly, but it made me more resilient, and I just want to do 30 of them now. So I'm up to 8. I just want to do, you know, they count the Winter Olympics as an Olympics.
Okay, I was about to say,
I always do
you're going to have
that.
to be 136. So of all the Olympic events, I imagine, well, the one that I imagine has the most people watching and has the most interest is the men's 100-metre athletics final. You called it at the last Olympics.
Ironically, a photo finish.
A photo finish. We'll have a listen to it in a moment. Tommy found it, but what's like you talked about the anticipation of calling a Melbourne Cup. Now, this was on the radio, so it wasn't the television.
No.
So it's not as much the call of record, for want of a better term, but it's a...
I was happy to do one, though. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, what a privilege. Like, it's probably seen as the biggest sporting event on the planet every 4 years.
Well, the thing about the 100 final, and the thing about athletics in general, there's not much to it. As long as you, well, some people don't run with shoes, but as long as you've got a pair of shoes on, you're the fastest person, aren't you? So, and the human race, we've all run. We've all tried to run.
There's no barrier entry.
No. So that person that wins is the fastest person on earth.
Yes.
You know.
Which is extraordinary.
Yeah.
Of the 7.5 billion.
So, you know, for a pure sporting event and occasion, I can see why the globe stops for it. But you talk about the anticipation, you know, before it.
Yeah.
There is another story about the 100 final that a lot of people don't know about, is that they decide, because you might have noticed with these sporting events now, they try and build them up even more, and they turn the lights off, and the people put their mobile phone lights on, and there's fireworks, and they come out with LED screen. Bit of sizzle, sizzle.
They're listening.
So Paris at 100-metre final, they've come out and they've done the sizzle. And they're at the start, and they're at the start.
Forever, didn't they?
And the heartbeat went round the stadium. Boom, 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 boom. I thought, gee, this is. And I was starting to get, oh, for heaven's sake, can we get this? You know, I mean, can we get this over and done with? There's only 8 seconds, but can we get over and done? Like, boom, boom, and this went on and on and on. And I had Jane Fleming with me as co-commentator, and I even said in the call, I think to Jane, I said, I think we should get on with this now. And Jane went, this is going on a long time. More for the athletes. I felt so sorry for the athletes. I reckon it went 5 minutes.
Right.
Anyway, sure enough, they get onto the blocks, the lights turn on, light, bang, off they go. Great race, photo finish, closest finish of all time, etc.
Let's have a listen.
But there was a reason why they held them for so long.
Okay, let's have a listen to the race and then I'll chat about that.
Ready. And away. Thompson away fairly. Seville out fast. Lyles is starting to dig in. They're across the track. Jacobs finishing fast as well. Thompson driving and out wide. Lyles. Thompson or Lyles. It is going to be a photo finish. A photo finish. Thompson from Jamaica and Lyles, the two fastest this year, have hit it locked together. They look up at the big screen and it's a photo finish. It's going down to the judge and it's a photo across about 6 or 7 athletes.
It's a photo finish for 7 lanes, and Noah Lyles
is going to do it. Lyles has been given it. The new global superstar from the USA has just won the men's 100 and has pinched it off Kashane Thompson, who looks at the big screen and can't quite believe it. Noah Lyles is...
Well done. Good call.
Well, the thing was, it was a bit of a 50-50. A few commentators called the other.
They did.
The other runner. And where I was calling from, I would never have had a go. We weren't really near the line, so it would have been a death trap to have a go at it. But yeah, the reason why they held them was so long they couldn't turn the lights back on.
Ah.
It was a bit of a debacle. So there was so much theatre around that race that night. But, yeah, I mean, the actual still photos of that finish are remarkable.
Amazing.
I think the athlete that finished 6th was beaten 0.4 of a second or something. It was ridiculous.
So of all those sports listed, is there a sport you haven't done yet? So we're talking about the Olympics. I mentioned I'd love to do the cricket, but I've obviously broadcast cricket. I look back at the Big Darryl Eastlake call on the weightlifting, and I love that.
Because Darryl was so loud that they had to build a special commentary box for him because he was disturbing the commentary next door.
Yeah, I do remember that. But I love the way Dave Colbert calls the field events. Like he does it like the way I, in my mind, love it and would like to do it. Here comes the big pole. He wanders out here and look at him flexing the arms and he starts swinging the hammer. I love it. And so I would love to have a crack at weightlifting. And
weightlifting, okay.
I've spoke to Brad
very
Johnson.
Technical sport
Yeah,
too.
but I don't think it's the big man from Bulgaria. He's got it above their head. I would love the way Darryl did it. I'm not going technical because the audience doesn't understand technical.
I think if there's another commentator out there than Darryl that can go full puffer valve,
I think it'd be
just veins coming out. It'd be you, I reckon.
That, and I'd love to call a Formula One race. But for you, who listed 30 different sports, there's not many left. But if you could do one sport and then one actual event, what would they be?
It's a great question. I think the two sports that and it's for no real reason, I just haven't been asked or, I just haven't been in a position to. And I must say the athletics does really interest me. I really do love the athletics, but I've never done swimming and that would suit my wheelhouse, of what I do. So especially an Aussie rampage in the pool would be fantastic, but I've never really been given the chance. The other sport that I do really enjoy watching, I do like the MotoGPs. I do like motorsport.
Do you?
Yeah, I do really enjoy it. And again, that would suit my wheelhouse. So I think I'd be very happy to go and call a Grand Prix with Bagnaia and Marquez and all that. I think that would be fun.
He's back in business, Marquez.
He is. So those sort of sports, an event. I've always thought if you're going to be a sports commentator, the pure event to commentate on would be Wimbledon. I just think that would be fantastic, and I love my tennis, or even those Grand Slams, the US or the French. In horse racing, a Kentucky Derby.
So Kentucky Derby's the one, but that's something that could happen in your...
Possibly. I mean, the thing is...
you've called
England,
horse races in America and in the UK.
And England, Royal Ascot and the Grand National have done those. But I think the Kentucky Derby is... The thing about the Kentucky Derby is that even if you're a non-racing person, you know what the Kentucky Derby is. It's an iconic, an American sporting event. So I think that would be great. And and maybe and look, away from that, from racing. Don't know. Indianapolis 500.
Yeah. Wow.
Something like that.
That would be good. Our man Scotty McLaughlin.
That would be good, wouldn't it? So...
Bloody Matty Hill. Or you're taking Lee Diffie's job, who has been on this show before.
Has he been? Yeah.
I used to work with
so
him
he
at
was
10.
a lot higher than 293.
Yeah.
And rightly so.
Yeah, no, he was in a touch earlier. But you've been just as good. Hey, just before we finish, we won't finish the same way, but this is more for my benefit. We mentioned it right at the start about people thinking you're biased in a call. It doesn't happen in cricket, really. Like I can call the World Cup final in Ahmedabad, Australia-India, and yes, I would prefer Australia wins that game of cricket. But you don't really get feedback from Indian supporters saying, "Are you biased against Australia?" It doesn't really seem to happen in cricket, but in footy, I can do a game of footy between Fremantle and Adelaide, and I'll get messages saying, "I can't believe how much you favour Fremantle," and on the same game, I'll get supporters saying, "I can't believe how much you favoured Adelaide."
It's a little bit like covering an election, isn't it? You just can't get it right.
It is, and I support the Hawks, and I called with you Geelong Hawthorn.
Yeah.
And for anyone listening, I don't know how you view it. I go to Geelong and Hawthorn. All I want at any game of football is it comes down to the last minute. I don't care who wins.
Nope.
I just want it to come down to the last minute, because that is, for the crowd, the best result, and for a commentator, when you've done years of trying to get better at calling the footy, if you get the last minute, like we did the other day between Hawthorn and Geelong, that's when the job is at its funnest.
Of course. Yep.
So for anyone listening, we don't go favouring a team. We if a team gets 30 points down, that's when you can become a little bit hoping the other team comes back. But it doesn't matter who the team is, because you still just want that last-minute result.
No, and look, I hope that when we call, if I can speak of all the commentators, that you're trying to be so accurate that you are, if you do have a team that's 4 goals behind, but you feel there's still a chance, that's not being biased.
No.
That's just sort of seeing it the way you feel, But, I mean, honestly, every time I go to the football, I reckon 99.8% of my body couldn't care less who wins.
No.
Honestly, I couldn't. And it's about doing the job right, And I mean, we all have our teams. I mean, I was an unabashed Western Bulldogs
Big Dogs
supporter.
man.
Yeah, But when I call a Bulldogs game, I half forget they're the Bulldogs. I'm doing what I do, And I can't speak for the special comments guys, because obviously they've had more experience playing for those teams.
Yeah.
So that would be hard for them as well. And maybe a few of them overcompensate too, maybe negative against their team to try. And I know Braddy Johnson, who, he's a star, he hates calling Bulldogs games because he'll be pinned for that reason.
But the chief wouldn't mind me saying, Jason Dunstall definitely goes harder on the Hawks than he would any other side.
But I think what happens is because another team's surging and they might be 2 goals behind and it's becoming exciting, that the team that's in front believe the commentators are being biased.
Where you're barracking for the result.
Yeah, we want a good game. We want a close game.
Right. That's exactly right.
And if we ever sound deflated, it's probably because we're just a bit disappointed that it's not close, you know. But no,
like when we went to Brisbane Collingwood a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about Lee Matthews.
Yes.
You're expecting a cracking game of footy.
Well, it was a humdinger for a half.
It was a brilliant game, but Collingwood won by 10 goals. That's not what you're after as a commentator.
No.
You want Nick Dacos having a shot or Josh Dunkley having a shot after the side to decide the game, don't you?
Right. Well,
so for anybody that sends you messages saying you're biased against the team, no. We're putting this to bed right now, Hilly.
Well, we are at least.
We are.
Because the thing is, I feel so, the special comments guys, it's harder because they've been aligned to a team for so long.
Yes.
And some of them are living legends, that have been aligned to a team. So, in a case of, and I can see where Brad's coming from, like he was obviously a Bulldog living legend. So if he's calling a Bulldogs game, there's no win for him, So I get that, But I think because we get excited about just the game, if someone kicks something really exciting, a goal, we're going to get excited about it.
Absolutely.
That's the reality of it,
If that overhead from Jeremy Cameron
I know.
hadn't hit the post, if that had gone through...
No, you would have gone full puff of
would have lost my mind. Rex Hunt
lost your
style.
mind. In fact, to be honest, there would have been veins popping
There
out of
would
places
have.
that we
Full
didn't even.
David Parkin.
Like you were almost there, and it was, and it hit the top of the post. It was it was like a Jackie Chan
It
kind of
was.
Ronaldo
I think we got
type
Ronaldo
operation.
in there somewhere, and it just hit the
But that's
bloody
the fun
post,
of it.
didn't
I mean, it's just too much bloody fun, isn't
Yes,
it? You know, and
it is.
Um,
It is. I don't know how you view it. I've never met anyone apart from an Australian cricketer that has a better job than we do. In my mind, anyway. Like, there's no job I would take apart from batting number 3 for Australia than what we get to do and what we'll get to do tonight.
And that's the reminder I think we all have to give ourselves. You know, we have, like everyone else, you have a good day, a bad day, you get a bit tired, but you remind yourself, hey, it's a game of footy at the MCG, how lucky we are, you know, and I think a lot of sometimes social media negativity is probably because there's a bit of jealousy in there as well. You know, so I think you just, I mean, as you say, we work on it though. We work bloody hard on it, but at the same time, you wouldn't want to be anywhere else, even if it's the middle of June, it's pouring down rain at the MCG. I know where I'd like to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not the Bahamas.
No, it's a great way, and we always finish this podcast the same way, Hilly. I use always different examples. We have a lot of kids listen to this show. We're privileged a lot of people listen to this show. And people out there that want to achieve something in their life, whether it be the next Matt Hill as a race caller, whether it be the next Lewis Hamilton as a Formula One driver, or the next concert pianist, that you've had tremendous success in your field. And I love that you identified, as long as you can remember, that this is what you wanted to do, and now you've achieved that. So massive kudos to you. What advice would you give to those out there that are similarly passionate about a field as to how to achieve success in it?
Well, I think you just keep chipping away. Just dream hard, work hard, and the rewards will come your way. And there's no easy fix. You just keep going. And if your dream's big enough and your work ethic's hard enough, you'll get there. There's nothing physically in your way that can stop you.
I love that answer. Billy Brownless mentioned to me that he's seen you out and about, and he just barreled up and asked you to do race calls to entertain him.
He did do that, yes.
So if I was to give you our Thursday night Fox commentary team, which is yourself, myself, Jack Rewalt, Kingy, Eddie Betts, and Brad Johnson. And we've got 200 metres to go at Flemington for the Melbourne Cup. Is that something you can just roll out?
Yeah, probably.
Well, if
we were doing Fox Footy on a Thursday night, like leading the way would be Sarah Jones. She's leading from the front, the young filly. She's 3 lengths in front. But then, of course, Howie and Matt are there sneaking ground on the inside. The young buck, Jack Rewalt, storming over the top of them. The young colt, the Caulfield Guineas winner. Jones grabbed by Rewalt. Howard and Hill just behind them. Kingy with the big opinions right down the outside. It's going to be 100 to go. Johnson and Betts are on the outside because they're nowhere near us. 100 metres to go. Howard and Hill, stride for stride, working hard. Kingy coming at them with the big opinion over the top. Then the Colt Rewalt, they go to the line, they hit it. Howie's leading the team. He just wins. And then, of course, it's a triple dead heat. We're just following your direction, young man, on Fox Footy on a Thursday night.
There is the talent of the man you have been listening to, which is why he's known as the Ravi Shastri of our toner.
Not at all.
Hilly, an absolute pleasure.
No, thank you for having me, and I'm very privilished to be number 293. Thank you very much.
Mate.
Thank you, mate. It's been a pleasure.
That was brilliant, mate.